Okay, so today we enter the very treacherous landscape of Genesis 3. This is one of the most controversial passages in the Hebrew Bible. It's one of the most difficult to figure out. It's been, in my view, distorted over the centuries, and today we're going to try to find a different path. Um, Before though, I want to go over, of course, your amazing comments. So I'm going to go over one by one, and we're going to see if we can just, begin brainstorming together on this text, and then I'll begin the lecture. So starting with Rudolph. Somehow Rudolph, I guess I did get since you're on. That's great. Okay, well that does that. Since I took notes from your assignment, so I must have forgotten to put it in the grade book. Okay, yes. So great, that clarifies that. So Rudolph says, so Adam, right, seems to be clearly in the lead. Yes, Genesis 3:16. This is what we will be working on all day, right? This definition of this very thorny passage where it is said that her desire will be, or your desire will be for your husband, speaking to the woman, and he will rule over you. This is the translation. I am going to go in the direction of it being a mistranslation, and I will explain why. So yes, all of you who are reacting to Genesis 3:16 as being, the return of patriarchy, the oppression of women, I'm going to try to find a way to kind of debunk this passage and propose an alternative translation. So that's what we're gonna be doing. This is very new work, right? That hasn't yet been done on this passage, and you guys are gonna be participating in this pioneering work. So yes, so very good. Colon mentioned, along with a few of you, this notion of nakedness, right? So yes, let me put you all on the screen. Yeah, so the nakedness, I'm not going to talk about it today so much, so I'm going to say a few words now. This is really, the nakedness is the revelation of the weakness, right? Is the revelation of what you're trying to hide, right? So when they take the fruit, it's not just that their clothes fall off or whatever, right? Is that there something about them is revealed that they did not want to be revealed, and we're going to look at this, what that is. There are indications in the text to tell us what do each discover about themselves that is actually not so good, right? I know we're taught that Adam and Eve were created perfect. This is not the take we're going to take right here in this class. Adam and Eve are progressing, they are developing, they are evolving, so they're not finished, right? And there are some issues that they have to overcome, and these are the issues that are uncovered by this moment by the tree, and we're going to look at that. What are them? What are their respective weaknesses that all of a sudden now everyone else sees, right? So the nakedness is simply the uncovering of what you were trying to hide, or of a weakness, right? And then the beautiful gesture of God to cover that, right? There's so much symbolism there, which we'll not talk about, but yes, it's a beautiful gesture nevertheless. It's covering our weakness. So going to Olivera, so Olivera is very unhappy with with the discourse of God, which she is seeing just punishment after punishment, and she's wondering if we're still in the mother's house, or what happened to the mother's house. Did we kind of somehow get swept back into the father's house? So yes, this is the passage we're going to try to show. This is the challenge, right, that I'm giving myself and giving us. Try to show how this passage actually still belongs to the mother's house and is redemptive rather than punitive. Make sure you write this down, because this is going to be the direction I'm going to take. I'm going to look at these three words by God, the words to the serpent, the words to Eve, the words to Adam, and I'm going to show, this will be the challenge, I'm going to show that rather than being a punishment, this is a redemptive moment. This is the challenge. And of course, if I can show that it is redemptive, we're back in the mother's house, right? Hopefully Olivera will be convinced by the end of the class. Okay, so going on to, I guess this was Perso. Yes, a number of you noticed, and I can see why, but we'll have to rectify that, that Eve seems to be carrying more punishment than Adam, right? Um, I'm it's true that it looks like she's given added work in addition to working the land with Adam, right? She's going to be bearing children. So it looks like she's carrying more, but actually in the Hebrew text, you have an echo between the word that is translated pain for Eve and the word that is translated toil for Adam. Actually, in the Hebrew is the same word. So the intention of the text, itsev, right? Intention of the text is simply to say they both have the same amount of pain, right? So it's the same word to show that they're given kind of an equal punishment. And we're going to look whether it's a punishment still, right? I'm still doubting that or shedding doubt on that. But there is an intention in the text to show that they're both carrying an equal share, right? Of course, it's debatable, but we'll see as when we get done if we can see more clearly. And then, yes, a number of you are remarking, so this is also Perso, and also I think Kirschnitz, Eve as the temptress, right? She is the one through whom everything goes, right, wrong, right? And this has been, and we'll see today, this has been the classic interpretation. Eve is the one through whom sin entered the world. I think this is Paul who says that even, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But Eve is really seen as the bad guy here, right? At least in the traditional interpretations. I'm going to show that in the text it's not the case, right? I'm going to do this. But the interpretation, the history of interpretation has seen Eve as weak, as morally deficient, as the bad guy, as the one who is responsible for the whole fiasco, right? So you guys are seeing, I think, through the lens of the interpretation more than through the actual text, which we're going to really try to read without all of this baggage. But yes, this had been the classic interpretation, which I'm going to try to go in another direction today. Janakopoulos, what did you say? What did I write here? Oh yeah, that was interesting. Janakopoulos is asking why Eve is talking like believing the serpent rather than God, right? Actually, there's a really easy answer for that one. Ask yourself, did God ever talk to Eve? Let me just ask this to the class. Is there a time where you see God talking to Eve in this story? No. Right? It's interesting. God never talks to Eve. Imagine how special she must have felt when the serpent starts to talk to her. That's what I'm seeing. And so now this serpent is her best friends, right? BFF, best friends forever, right? Because it's true, there's a problem in this story where God is talking to the original Adam, but Eve is still hidden within this Adam, right? She's not yet birthed, right? So he's speaking to Adam. He's the one who retains the word. And when Eve emerges, right, God never really speaks to her. And so there is an issue here. There's a problem. We wonder again, why is God doing this, right? This God is really playing a dangerous game here in this garden with these two guys. Okay, so yes, does that satisfy you a little bit? I mean, do you see at least psychologically why Eve would be like, oh, someone's talking to me, how nice, let me listen to this guy, right? Okay, so that's just a quick answer, right? Butterfield, yes, Butterfield very unhappy with Genesis 3:16. So we'll have to look at that. Of course, today we'll be focusing mostly on that, right? Williams, yeah, good question. So it says in Genesis 2, let me make sure, when God talks to Adam before he differentiates him, right, talks to him, and says you're going to serve and guard the world, right? You're going to avad and shamar. Remember, we did those two verbs last time. We're going to protect the world. And so he's asking, rightly so, how is that supposed to happen? Like what, there is no guidance how the man's supposed to take care of the world, right? And actually today we're going to look at that. We have to, because Adam is going to fail in this caretaking. And so we have to see why he failed. What did he miss, right? So we're going to actually answer that question today. So you guys are in luck. Also very unhappy with the series of punishments, wondering if we are still in the mother's house also, right, along with the rest of you. Kirschnitz, yes, You mentioned also this notion, traditional interpretation, Eve as being the first one to fall, therefore she's probably the weaker link. Is she, right? This has been the traditional interpretation, which we will try to go against today. Christodulu, last one. Yes, Christodulu is, you're asking the right question. Did they translate this text correctly? That's the question, right? And who did this translation, right? It's a terrible text. I mean, especially I mean, the rest is okay, but Genesis 3:16 is like, whoa, what's happening, right? So he's actually wondering if the translation is correct. And I agree with you. There's an issue of translation which we're going to try to look at today, especially for Genesis 3:16. Okay, and then God in the plural, Christodulu, just to give you an idea. Yes, God is in the plural in these three chapters. In the same way, you will understand this very well, that Allah is in the plural also. It's the same type of plural. It's not a plural that they're separate beings, but it's a plural of magnificence. Right? In the Quran, you know that Allah speaks in the third person plural. Us, we. You're correct, right? So it's the plural of magnificence. He's so great that he's plural, right? It's the same literary device in the Hebrew Bible and here, right? Where God is the plural of magnificence, plural of majesty. It's although some people can argue that maybe God was a diverse being in relationship with itself, right? So there's some arguments for that, but most scholars lean towards the Islamic version of plural, which is plural of magnitude, right? Okay. All right, let's go. Let's do this. So today I'll introduce, so here's the plan. I'm going to introduce the history of interpretation, which I will go against. And this is mostly Greek influenced again, so we get to do a little bit more Greek. Then we'll look at Eve. We'll look at Adam. We'll skip the snake. And then I will conclude on the last bit when Adam names Eve, right? So this is the program. It's a very long program. So this is difficult because it's difficult for me to teach because it's new. It's new material, and I'm always there's always a little bit of gap. So I'm always trying out the new material with students. So I'm gonna be very eager to hear you, whether you can develop what I'm saying or maybe oppose it. I'm very open to criticism because you guys are my lab right now, right? So I'm actually gonna test these ideas with you, see if it's convincing, and then I can actually feel more confident. So this, you guys are my laboratory. All right, so let's begin. Traditional interpretations of this text. They're so wonderful to read. It's so I have been reading the commentaries of this text in both Jewish and Christian traditions. And it's interesting because Jews and Christians at the time when they're writing these commentaries, which is usually in the early Middle Ages, right? They're not talking, these two communities, right? Jews and Christians are at odds with each other for a number of reasons, from the beginning of from early medieval times until the 19th century. They're not talking. So it's so interesting that the interpretations are the same. So I find that suspicious, right? That the Jewish commentators and the Christian commentators saying exactly the same thing. So I'm tracing it back to a root. They are sharing they're the same because they are both born it can be argued in the Greek worldview, right? When these commentators are starting to grapple with these texts, both Jewish and Christian commentators are actually living in the Greek world, right? This is happening when Greece has the monopoly of culture. So even though Rome is in charge politically, Greece is still in the heads of everybody, right? Greece is the civilization. Greece is the arts and letters, right? Even though the Romans have the throne, right? Or the empire. So this is the reason, in my view, why they agree so much. So when you read people, I mean, I should have written a little bit, I should have jotted down some of what the commentators say, but in general, what they're saying, I'll just summarize it. The way they say it is so funny, but in general, what they're saying, you can jot this down, is that the woman is the at fault because she sinned first. So on her rests the whole guilt of the whole situation, right? That's number one. Second thing, there's a consensus is that Eve faulted first because she's weaker morally than the man, right? This is really a consensus that the woman somehow is morally inferior, and this is why the snake went to her and not to Adam, right? The snake, he could perceive who is the weaker link here. So he sensed that Eve was morally weaker or more vulnerable morally, and so he went to her because she is not as moral or as strong morally as her husband. So that's another thing. So another thing they say is that, yeah, Eve is fully responsible for the death of the world, and this is why in Genesis 3:16, God says, therefore, the man will rule over the woman because she's so weak morally. She needs some kind of moral guidance from the man. Got it? Right? So 3 steps, right? Eve is the one tempted. Eve is at the origin of the whole fiasco. She creates the death of the world. Why? That's point 2. She's morally inferior to the man, and so she's the one that the snake targets because she's so inferior. And number 3, God, therefore, in retaliation, creates an authority over her because she's too weak to make proper moral decisions. So she needs the man to be the head and to be the moral guide because she clearly can't do it. Okay, this is the interpretation in both Jewish and Christian all the way to today, right? But I'm going to show that these interpretations are deeply rooted in the Greek worldview, not the Hebraic worldview, right? Okay, we'll see that in a second. Rudolph, go ahead.
What time span are we talking about from the writing of the Bible to this interpretation that you just depicted?
Very good question. So these texts, so tradition says that Moses, right, is the one who wrote the book of Genesis, but we can see very clearly that Genesis 1 to 11, and this is what I wanted to say in my introduction, which I skipped last time. Genesis 1 to 11 is written in a style completely different than Genesis 12 to, I think, 48, right? So Genesis 12 to 48, there's a unity of style. You can sense it's one author. Genesis 1 to 11 is completely different style. Very archetypal, a lot of symbols, a lot of metaphors. And when you read the literature from Sumer, right, which is the civilization from where the Hebrew culture arose, right? Sumer is a civilization, one of the oldest civilizations in the world. It's one of the first, I think, along with the Indus Valley, it's one of the first sites where human beings emerged, right? So this is dating to 5000 BC, 4000, 3000 BC, right? The literature emerging in Sumer in 3000 BC, which I'm going to allude to today, especially the literature pertaining to the goddess Inanna, right? Which we'll talk about. Let me put in the chat this goddess because I'm going to mention her. This literature emerges in 3000 BC, right? And you have a powerful parallels between the Genesis 1 to 11 and these ancient texts from 3000 BC. And so if you read one example, very, very famous example is the Epic of Gilgamesh, whom some of you know probably, right? You should read it if you haven't yet. Gilgamesh. It's a very ancient text from around 3000 BC from Sumer. Let me write this guy, right? This is Sumer, is this ancient civilization, right? Which spans from 5000 to around 2000 BC. Around, I'm not precise, right? Right. And so what scholars have noticed is that there are parallels, thematic parallels, idiomatic expressions, linguistic parallels between this very ancient literature and Genesis 1 to 11. And so this leads me to say, to conclude, along with a bunch of other people, that Genesis 1 to 11 predates Moses by thousands of years, was written around 3000 BC, along with these other texts, and then Moses, and was transmitted orally, and then through Abraham and so forth, and then through the tribe of the Levites, and then Moses, who was a Levite, of course, had access to this tradition or these texts, right? and then adds this compilation to the whole book that he's writing. Does that answer your question?
It does, and the next question begs to be asked that what these interpretations are, don't you agree that it would be a very time appropriate thing, thousands of years later, that an original text from a faraway culture, long forgotten, is now being transposed and made useful in back then their actual modern time?
Yeah, so they're then looking at this text, but they're not looking at it from a Sumerian perspective, which is the
Exactly.
view of the
Yeah,
text. They're looking at it from a Greek perspective, and therefore they are distorting, in my view,
exactly.
the interpretations. That's the problem, right? Very good. So I hope you guys wrote down this, all I said about Inanna, Epic of Gilgamesh, Sumer, and so forth, because this is the foundation, right, of what we're going to do today. So basically, so going back to what I was saying, right? So these texts, very ancient texts dating from 3000 BC, they begin to be commented around a 100, 200 BC to now, right? Within the Hellenistic period, the Greek period. And so there's a consensus. Why? Because they're all thinking like Greeks. And so if we go back to the Greeks, we will see how these interpretations came about, going back to Aristotle that we talked about last time. There's one little thing I didn't mention when we talked about him, which I'm going to add now to what we said last time, right? Remember what I said about Aristotle last time, right? He looks at the body temperature. He's a biologist, right? Body temperature, women cooler, men hotter. So he deduces a number of things from that, that because the man is hotter, he's more energetic, he's more outward driven, so he should be in politics. And the woman, she's cooler, therefore more sluggish, she's more stable, she should stay home. Right? Okay, so we saw that last time, but now there's more. Now there's more, and this more is the basis for these Judeo-Christian interpretations of Genesis 3. So this more is this. This is what I didn't tell you last time that Aristotle also says. Because the woman is more sluggish, says Aristotle, her spirit is less, she's less energetic, right? Therefore, he says, she has a lesser capacity for self-control. Because if you're kind of like this, right, you can't resist temptation. You're just gonna fall further into temptation. Whereas if you're energetic and robust like the man, when temptation comes, you're gonna, you're gonna resist it in a masculine way, right? You're gonna really resist it because you have the energy to resist. I'll give you an example. Suppose you spent, this is a great example. Let me put you on the white screen, right? Suppose you've been exercising all day and you ate well, and then someone presents you with a Big Mac. Do you have a stronger a strength to resist or a weaker strength to resist? You've worked out, you had a good day, you've been, is it going to be easy to resist the Big Mac or hard to resist? What do you think?
Harder, naturally.
Easier, you mean? Easier because
Easier, easier, yeah.
you're strong, you've worked out, this is a very small temptation. You're having a good day. You're not going to mess it up with this right now. Suppose you spend the whole day in front of the TV, depressed, and someone brings you a Big Mac. Now, are you going to resist? Well, no. Okay, exactly. That's the point Aristotle is making. He's saying the woman, energetically, she's like that person sluggish in front of the TV. She has less energy. She's less spirited. And so as temptation comes, she's just too, there's not enough drive in her to resist the temptation. Whereas the man, because he's very driven, he's very robust, he can resist the temptation. Therefore, says Aristotle, it's not that the woman is inherently more evil, right? Thank goodness he says that, right? But he says she's more prone to fall into evil because of her lower energy. So he's not saying we're inherently bad, right? But he's saying because energetically, as women, our energy is lower, we have a harder time resisting evil than the man. And therefore, says Aristotle, the man should dominate the woman because he has the strength to dominate evil. Therefore, he can be a guide and a shepherd to her. Are you seeing how the Judeo-Christian interpretations are exactly the same as what Aristotle is saying? Are you following this? Put your hand on the screen if you're with me, right? What I'm saying is that these interpretations are not coming from the biblical text. They couldn't be, because the biblical text is not chauvinistic, it's not patriarchal, it doesn't hate women, right? But they're coming from this Greek worldview of already knowing that the woman is decadent, she's morally corrupt, she needs the man to dominate. So they have this in their head, and so they read the text and they're like, oh yeah, of course, woman ate the fruit because she's morally deficient, and now God is saying the man should rule over the woman, duh, because she needs some guidance. So they're looking at the text with Greek lens. That's the issue. Let me say that again. These Judeo-Christian commentators who date from around 200 BC to the beginning of modernity, they're not looking at the text with Hebrew eyes. They're looking at the text with Greek eyes, and this is leading, in my view, to a deep distortion of what is happening. Okay? Are we all on the same page so far? Are you seeing how the traditional interpretations are problematic because they're coming from very late lens, Greek lens, which has nothing to do with the Hebrew lens? And so now what I want to do is go back to these texts, but I want to apply the Sumerian lens. I want to look at these texts from the context in which they were written, which is the civilization of Sumer, which is, like I said, 5,000 to 3,000 BC. We know, or we have enough evidence to know that the Genesis 1 to 11 was written around that time, within that context. Why? Because there are too many, not only thematic connections, but you have also idiomatic expressions. So for example, I'm trying to think of one. It doesn't come to me, but when I read the Epic of Gilgamesh, there was a whole sentence that was exactly the same as one of the sentences used in Genesis, the book of Genesis 1 to 11. So there are some even whole sentences, right? Ways of saying things, idiomatic expressions that are the same. And then of course the same archetypal symbols, they are in the both, right? So we know that the text of Genesis 3 was written around that time. And so what I want to do today is look at the text from the perspective of the literature of Sumer. And I want to focus especially on the literature around the goddess Inanna, which I mentioned here in the chat, right? Because there are so many connections between the goddess Inanna in the literature of Sumer and Eve. So, okay. So are we ready? Of course, ideally would have been to give you some of those texts to read, but that's okay. You'll have to, I will tell you the stories. Okay, so let's start with Eve at the tree. So she's at the tree, and what I'm going to do is tell you briefly before we go into what she's doing at the tree, right? I want to tell you a similar story about Inanna and her tree, right? And then what I want us to do is to kind of look through that lens at what is happening with Eve, with her tree, okay? Are you guys ready? Put your hand on the screen if you're ready. Yes? Okay, good. So this is a story. You can find these texts, all these texts on Inanna in this book written by, I think it's Wolkstein and Kramer, and it's called Inanna. So all the stories I'm going to tell you are from that text. Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth. Right. So if you know a little bit about the Sumerians, they worship the pantheon of gods. But one of the most important gods was actually a female deity called Inanna. So these stories I'm going to tell you, which are similar to what we read here in our text, actually taken from that book by Kramer and Wolkstein. Okay, so in that book, you have a story of young Inanna before she has any experience with the world, before she has any experience with a man, right? She has a tree. And in this tree, there is a snake. Not only a snake, there is a bird. And hiding in the bark of the tree, there is Lilith, whom we mentioned before, right? And Inanna is looking at her tree, and she's longing for her tree to become a throne and a bed. Her throne and her bed. She wants that tree to become that, and she's longing for that, but the tree is all messed up. The bark is very coarse, there's this bird, there's this snake, and Lilith is, kind of, looming kind of all around this tree. So she's very unhappy with her tree. And then the story goes that Gilgamesh comes around, and she asks Gilgamesh, can you please, do something about my tree? So Gilgamesh takes an axe and he destroys the tree. And then he builds out of it a bed and a throne, and Inanna is momentarily happy, right? This is the story, right, about Inanna and her tree. So just a few more indications, the meaning of these symbols in Sumer, and then we can now then go into our text and see if we can see more clearly what's going on. The snake in the Sumerian literature has several meanings, but one of the meanings of the snake is transgression. The snake is the one who can move between worlds. There is no boundaries for this snake, right? It can go in the realm of the dead and it can go in the realm of the living. He doesn't have the same limitations as the living have. He can transgress, right? The bird is the symbol of wisdom and it's a symbol of power, right? So the power that comes from wisdom. And Lilith, we know, she's this kind of unbridled dark feminine, right? She's also the one who will go around and sleep with everybody and make all kinds of crazy things, right? She has this is unbridled sexuality. Lilith, she's kind of the dark feminine. So here is Inanna looking at her tree, and her tree is filled with this snake, with this bird, with Lilith, and she's so unhappy until the tree is cut down and made into a bed and a throne for her. Okay, so that's the story. Now, let's go into our text. Here we also have a woman and a tree and a snake. How would you understand if you were from Sumer, right? Now I've put you in the civilization of Sumer. If you were a Sumerian and or from that time and you're reading the story of Eve and her and the tree, how would you interpret what is going on there? Let me hear you on that, based on the story I just told you. So in other words, when Eve is with the tree, and the tree is good for wisdom, and there is a snake in the tree, what is going on? What is she looking at? What is this? If you compare it to the story of Inanna, what is going on in the Eve story? Okay, let's start with Giannakopoulos, and then Christodoulou, and then Rudolph.
It's a very similar story.
Yep.
You know,
oh.
you see, like, could have had two brothers, but if they had the same story, they would have wrote it two slightly different ways.
So you're noticing, right? Absolutely. Clearly these texts are contemporary. They are written in the same era, right? They mean the same thing. So what does the text of Inanna mean? First of all, maybe we can try that. And then what does the text with Eve mean? So Christodoulou, do you want to try?
Well, I was just going to say the snake now makes sense in the biblical text, like why the snake and not any other animal. Because now it shows like an animal that knows what death is and can show it to Eve.
Yes, this animal is leading Eve beyond the limits that God has ascribed for her, right? There is an issue here of her wanting to transgress the limits that have been placed on her. We saw this already, right? We'll see it again with the Tower of Babel. So there is here this desire for Eve to transcend her own condition and get to a higher state, perhaps, right? And the snake is the one who does that. The snake is the ultimate guide because the snake is moving between worlds easily. It's always transgressing, right? So Eve here is trying to go beyond the limits of the garden in a way, right? So that's the first thing we're getting here from this text. Rudolph and then Williams.
Very similar thought process over here. I see Eve under that light as the one who objectively just wants to fulfill a need. I don't think she's thinking further than, okay, so there is food, I'm hungry, I'd like to eat it. The serpent is yet to be determined to be bad, so it's just someone that or who says, go ahead, what's wrong with it? God isn't here, you don't see him, you don't hear him, so you go ahead and do that. So it's kind of this crude carelessness that's being described of humans trying things that they're unaware of.
Yes, very good. Very good. Like we said last time, right? We are not yet in the context of sin. right? This is humans being curious. This is humans testing their limits like a toddler, right? If you have had a toddler, you know what I'm talking about, right? They're constantly testing you and trying to see how far they can go with you, right? This is human beings testing, like, how far can I go with this? Can I go beyond the garden? Like garden, it's good for a while, but can I go, right? This is curiosity. This is wisdom. Wisdom is this. Wisdom is, in the ancient world, wisdom is the ability to see beyond the real. That's what philosophy is, right? The ability to see beyond what is obvious. So wisdom itself is transgressive, right? So this is a woman who is curious, who is attracted to transcendence, right? She's perhaps the first mystic, right? So we see that there is something positive about this whole situation, but as we know from the text of Inanna, there's also a dark side. So please tell me what you're sensing is the dark side here also. Williams, you can continue. Go ahead.
It's unbridled progress without any control.
Exactly.
So like if she's unlocking knowledge, but there's no control, it's that's why I said like the Garden of Eden is more like an experiment, and God is letting them run the experiment. And necessarily, if you think about the serpent necessarily is not evil. It's just a factor in the experiment, a control.
Yes.
And the whole goal is to get you beyond it. That's what I was saying yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. You're really getting this. You're really getting this idea, right? Absolutely, right? This is an experiment. This is a plot. This is a drama. This is not a sin, transgression, punishment. We're not there yet. This is in Genesis 4. Here we are in the human being's self-discovery and testing of its limits, right? And Eve here is wanting wisdom. She's seeking transcendence, which is, later on, in fact, this has so powerfully struck the Jewish sages, this moment of Eve seeking wisdom, that from then on in the Hebrew Bible, when they talk about wisdom, they personify it as a woman, right? So there's after Eve, the sages will kind of be like, wow, woman is the one who really is made for wisdom. So actually the sages of the Bible itself never condemn Eve. They take note that it is the woman who sought wisdom first, right? I'm doing all the positive right now. Then we'll go to the negative. But the positive, right, is we have here a woman who is attracted to wisdom, and the sages and the writers of the Hebrew Bible will take note of that and connect from then on the woman to wisdom. If you read the book of Proverbs, wisdom is personified as a woman, right? And throughout the ancient Near East also, woman is the one who is connected to wisdom. Woman is the one who taps into wisdom better than the man. So that's the positive. And then we have the dark side that Williams is starting to see. Unbridled wisdom, no limits. And remember, what did we say about limits last time? What's the importance of limits? Remind me, and then I'll go to whoever has their hand up still. What is the problem? What is the benefit? Why do we need limits? Why are limits important? Remind me, what did we say last time? It was very important. In other words, why God says no, don't eat that. What's the point? What was the point of that? Let's remind ourselves of that. What is the benefit of limits? Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
To teach self-control.
For what?
For
what end?
For love.
Yes, exactly, right? We saw that limits is about relationship. If you cannot control yourself, if everything is your possession, you can never be with another human being, because they will always be a thing for you that you can possess, right? So God at the tree is really trying to teach them relationship. This is the tree which is meant to teach them to relate to each other, right? And so limits, make sure you write this down, because this is a fundamental idea here, which will continue all the way to Genesis 11. Limits are there for the sake of relationship. If we have no limits on our desire to possess and have, there will never be another human being in our lives, because we will want to possess them like another object in the world, right? The only way that a subject can emerge in front of us is if we are capable of curbing the instinct of possession and, assimilation. Right? So the limit that God is putting in the garden through the tree is there to teach them, is the beginning of ethics, is the beginning of teaching them, you can have everything, but there are some things you cannot have. And one of them is your partner, right? You can't possess them like you possess a fruit, right? You can't control them like you control an animal, right? So so now when we see Eve with like the unbridled, if we connect to Inanna, right, we see this kind of unbridled desire, no limits. She wants to get rid of the limits and have access to it all, right? Very good. Okay, what else are we seeing in terms of the dark side of Eve? Edmonds and then Rudolph.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly respond to your point about limits, treating people like ends rather than like means to an end. One thing that I'm curious about is that God doesn't seem to be modeling this behavior so much. He possessed the tree. He seems to possess the right to control the destiny of Adam and Eve. He can choose where they go, what they do. Punish them if they don't do what he wants. It seems like he is treating both of them almost just as means in his experiment, right? Just as objects to control.
Careful, because God is losing control here, right?
But,
this is the story of God losing control, right? And we see how he kind of scrambles back on board, right? So actually, if you listen to the introduction, well, I know you haven't had time yet, but we are talking here about a God who is kind of, responding rather than imposing, right? God is kind of responding to the situation rather than creating the situation, right? So he instigates, but then he really loses control. And we see that throughout Genesis. All the book of Genesis is a story of how God loses control, right?
Right.
And then scrambles back, right, to make something out of it, right? So actually, specifically in Genesis, right, you don't have this kind of God who is playing with puppets, right?
Mm-hmm.
The human being is constantly running out. He's constantly scrambling and trying to do something with the mess that has been created, with joy. There's a certain joy and excitement, I think, in God scrambling or after us. It's not a desperate scrambling, but there is definitely scrambling going on, right? As how I see it. Rudolph, go ahead.
So would you be able to draw a comparison between that Hebrew view and the Sumerian view, just to see how it has morphed? Is God scrambling thousands of years earlier? Is there a similar God?
No.
What was the wisdom then?
Yeah, this is very different. In the Sumerian view, the gods are not in connection, right? There is one of the main distinctions, I think, between Sumer and the Hebrew spirituality is that in Sumer, man is supposed to feed the gods. And in the Hebrew, it's God who feeds the man, right? Complete reversal. And you can see how they are coming from that culture, but they are reversing it because they have received a specific revelation, right? There is a specific genius to the Hebrew nation, which is different from Sumer, even though they're talking Sumer. Sumerian language and archetypes and so forth is very different what's going on there, right? And we'll see, the Eve is much more developed character than Inanna, right? We're going to see, actually, it's much more developed. But it's kind of, it helps to look at the story of Inanna to really see what's going on with Eve. Eve is really the first shaman, right? Really. This is shamanistic situation. She is looking into transcendence. She's longing to transcend the limitation. And this is the very definition of wisdom. But in doing so, and this, in my view, is the darkest moment. In doing so, she completely bypasses the man. Look at how she does this. This is so ruthless. She's sitting here. And by the way, the text mentions Adam is right there, the poor fool. He's sitting there with her. At no moment does she turn to him and say, hey, what do you think? Should we? No, he doesn't exist. Right? She is entirely mesmerized by the serpent, by her shamanistic voyage and initiation that is about to start. And in this whole, kind of moment of transcendence, she completely bypasses the man. He does not exist. Even though he's standing there, she is absolutely unaware of this man's presence. This is so this is a woman who is at the height of obliviousness to what's going on around her. The way I read Eve here is she's oblivious to the possibility of a relationship with this man. Very different from the man, by the way. What does the man say when he first sees Eve? Remember? What does he... What's the poem that comes out of his mouth when he sees Eve that has just been born out of him? Anybody remember what he says? It's very beautiful. Go back to the text. Find the moment when Eve is created and what Adam says when he sees her. I'm trying to find the text for you also. It's Genesis 2. Yes, Genesis 2 verse 19, I think. No, 20. I can't read these numbers. 23. Genesis 2:23. What does it say? Rudolph, you want to tell us?
I got to pull out my my text here. Hold on one second.
Okay, who wants to precede Rudolph? Who knows? Who has the text? What does it say? Olivera, go ahead.
It is now bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, she shall become called woman.
Okay, very good, right? So he is, in a way, he is really observing, right, that this man is awakening in the presence of this woman, right? He's realizing this woman has just awakens my soul, right? And he bursts into song. So Adam is clearly in love with Eve. He is completely into her. She, on the other hand, is interested in the shamanistic pursuits, right? She has absolutely no concept of this man. This, in my view, is the dark moment of her endeavor. It's not the quest for wisdom. It's not the desire to transcend limitation. It's her absolute lack or obliviousness to the presence of the man beside her. There is not a single moment where she turns to him to ask him what he thinks. What should we do? What do you... No dialogue. Instead, she takes the fruit and then literally shoves it in his face. It's like there's no word spoken between them, right? He is silent, she is silent. You can sense there is no relationship between them. She is absolutely oblivious to what he wants. Does he want me to take the fruit or not? She doesn't care, right? Are you seeing this? Right, because this is very important, because if we can understand her true transgression, right, her true issue, we will understand what God tells her, right? This is where I'm leading to. I'm trying to lead to what God is going to say, but first we have to see what is the real problem here. So if you can jot this down, and then I'll get a few of your comments, right? Jot this down, that there's good and bad here, right? There's good and bad. There's just like for Inanna, right? With the tree and the bird and so forth. On the good side, Eve is attracted to wisdom. She's the first philosopher. She's the first sage. She's the first shaman. She's sensing that there is a possibility of transcendence beyond just eating, right? There is wisdom. She is curious. She is attracted to this. All of this is good, right? In fact, it's why I know it's good, because the writers of the Hebrew Bible will take note, and from then on will associate woman with wisdom. So this is actually seen in a positive light by the writers of the Hebrew Bible, right? Dark side, the lack of limits, right? She wants to transcend limits. By transcending limits, she is destroying the possibility of relationship, right? And we see that actually in the way that she has absolutely no connection to her husband. She doesn't address a single word to him. She doesn't ask for his advice. She doesn't communicate with him. She takes and she imposes, right? Eve is taking over. She's the center of the universe. This is a complete narcissistic personality disorder, right? That we have here with Eve. And this is her weakness, right? This inability to connect is her weakness. And this is what will become unveiled. And this is what God will address when he talks to her, finally. Okay, are we good? Let me first make sure everybody's good. Anybody need me to clarify? Are you all good? Put your hand in the screen if you're seeing this. Okay, Rudolph, go ahead.
So when you're saying she's narcissistic and she is bypassing her husband, being oblivious and somehow premeditating to seek her own wisdom, to be a truth seeker, can we really say that it is a transgression, or can I also look at this moment of Eve being just simply a pure and very naive and very neutral and objective being of some sort, who hasn't been told by anyone anything. So if you're saying that something is premeditated, it assumes that Eve has already some sort of inkling or knowledge about seeking the truth.
Yes.
But what we know of Eve, up on Eve until this point, is truly that she's just there. She just came. She was that half of Adam who also didn't know anything. So she comes from nothing,
Yes.
into nothing. And just like God says I is, she is a reflection of just I am.
Yes. Very good. Exactly. You put it better, right? This is not, this is naive. She's just emerging as a typical human being. All of us would have done the same thing. She's just existing and wanting to exist more, right? So yes, I love the way you put it. There's a purity there. There is an innocence in this narcissism, right? And this is why it's not a sin, right? Because it's not. There is no evil there. It's just natural impulse of something that exists, right? Will always want to. I mean, a toddler wants to test his limits, right? This is not sinful. This is typical human behavior, right? So this is what Eve. So I love the way you put it. I agree with you 100%. Olivera.
Hi, I have a question. So we have been studying all this, and then I am thinking there was, like, at the end of the text, for example, it says that they learn what's good and what's bad. So good and bad was there before they sin, but by sinning they become aware of something that was already existing. Is this act of disobedience a reward more than a punishment? Because you saw that I wrote that there was a lot of punishment and stuff, but by transgressing, they become more aware, and they have like a holistic view of the things that exist. So how is this seen if by doing so they become more wise? And why wouldn't God try to prevent them from seeing the whole and just when they see a part of it?
Yeah, and we know God is not preventing them because he's instigating them, right? He put the tree in their face. I still believe that God wanted them to eat that fruit. Like, I just can't help it. Like, it's like, who does that, right? Here, you know? So I think I would agree. I think I'm on the same line of thought as where is he? Is it Williams, right? This is a whole drama. This is a setup so that they will eventually leave the garden, right? Which is where they can't stay forever, like fetuses in the garden, right? There is really God instigating, and then Eve reacting in a very healthy way to the instigation, but there's still room for growth in the way that she reacts, and that's what God will address in the so-called curse, right? So let's go there. Unless there's a one more comment. Let me see. I think I see a couple more hands. Yes, Janakopoulos and then Rudolph, and then we'll go into God's curse.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. It wasn't like only punishments, you know what I mean? God also gave them a lot of chances for retribution, you know, to say, okay, I did wrong. You know, when God calls out to them, Adam, where are you? You know, and Adam doesn't respond. And once again, he calls out to them multiple times, where are you? And then if he had responded to him and came out and said, Lord, I'm sorry for not following your will, you know, doing something bad, he would have forgiven them. But it's because they didn't seek forgiveness that happened, you know? It wasn't just the second they did it, God punished them, you know? It wasn't like that at all.
But remember, put yourself in their place, right? This is the first time they see that there's something wrong with them. I mean, you can't come out and face anybody like that. It's the first. I mean, we're used to being wrong all the time and to asking for forgiveness. But imagine the first time it happens. There was so much shame. I would imagine Eve realizing, oh my God, I have narcissistic personality disorder. Oh, this is so ugly. Like, why? And then like, this has been revealed, right? You don't want to face the creator, right? So there's, but we're going to get there. Let's get there now. Let's go to Eve and see what God tells her. And then we'll take a break and then we'll do Adam. So let's go and see. I'm only going to do the first part, which is we can now better understand the first part of Genesis 3:16. I'm going to skip the children part, which is also, it would be nice, of course, to talk about that, but I want to focus on Genesis 3:16, this which is the most problematic one, which is where God says, your desire for your husband, and he shall rule over you, right? We'll get to the rule in a bit, but what happens here? What is God doing when he tells Eve, your desire from now on will be for your husband? What is going on here? How is this a response to her disorder, right? How is God actually here redeeming something that was broken in Eve? Tell me a little bit how you're seeing this notion of the desire, which actually, this in the Hebrew, let me just be more precise, is teshuka, which means more than desire. This is a very strong, loving, and including sexual desire, right? So that's what teshuka means. So what is God doing here that is actually redemptive? Let's see if you get that first part. So Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
I think he's saying that this desire for knowledge isn't inherently a bad thing, but that it has to be turned to a new source now. Now she kind of has to turn her life a little bit, saying this desire in itself isn't bad, but you have to change a little bit.
Okay, so versus the shamanistic journey, the wisdom found in the other worlds, God is saying wisdom here next to you, right? Wisdom of love, wisdom of relationship, perhaps, right? So yes, we could say that God is turning her gaze, right, away from this alternative reality or this beyond to the immanent. God is turning her gaze from transcendence to immanence, right? Telling her here in this world, you will find what you're looking for rather than beyond the world. So this is a great point. You guys can write this down. So first thing God might be doing here is turning the gaze of Eve from transcendence to immanence and telling her within the limits of the world, you will find the wisdom you're looking for. You will find the transcendence you're looking for here. Within the world that I have created, within those limitations is the wisdom you're looking for. So yes, that's a very nice way to put it. I like that. Christodoulou, how would you interpret this? Go ahead.
I think I always see it like quite negatively. Like I see it as like a punishment. He is flipping her ideas on herself, right? He is saying, "Oh, you disregarded Adam. Now you must you will be obsessed with him." Like it's a it's a.
Is that a bad thing though? It depends, I suppose. I mean, is it a bad thing that now her gaze will be turned towards Adam instead of towards abstract wisdom? Yes, Olivera. Some women would say yes, that's true. So I see what you're saying. Of course, it's like God is like cheating her, right? Out of it's like but. Let me, well, maybe Rudolph can try to answer, and then I will give you the Hebraic perspective on this. Rudolph, go ahead.
Which I don't know, but, putting together what I just heard, it feels a little bit as if Adam and Eve are guests in the Lord's house, a temporary situation. Eve got interested in harvesting some fruit from God's tree, which is realistically not an apple to be eaten. It is the knowledge and the wisdom that God has, the infinite, incredible wisdom. And with that move saying, listen, you just really can't take from God. You really need to get with your earthly father, husband, man, contemporary, other guy, and try to work it out, communicate, seek what wisdom is in man. Let him resonate what you're saying and take it from there. Yeah. That's how I just saw it.
Yes, and you're exactly on track, right? In the Hebrew concept, wisdom is relational. It's not like the Greek, right? Going back to the Greeks, whom we are stabbing in the back during this whole class, right? The Greeks are saying, Plato, for example, in going back to the Symposium, right? Plato says in the Symposium, the highest wisdom or the highest love, actually, the highest love, he says, is not the love of your peers, is not the love of a man or of a woman. The highest love is the love of wisdom, right? So in the Greek concept, wisdom is found outside of the world. You have to leave behind the worldly, distorted perspective to find wisdom. In the Hebrew, it's different. Wisdom is found in relationship within the world. As you engage in the world, as you weave complex and challenging relationships, this is when you become wise, right? And so God is actually, so to respond to Christodoulou, right? When God is shifting her gaze onto Adam, it's not like, oh, now you'll be obsessed with him and all you'll think about is makeup and, you know, painting your nails so you look cute. This is not what's going on, right? This is, he's telling her wisdom is relational. You will find wisdom by engaging with the people in the world, through your children, through your husband. As you are entering this, the complexity of human relationships, that is how you will become wise, by becoming relational, right? By the way, the symbol for wisdom in the ancient Near East as a whole is the ear. Why? It's the ability to listen, it's the ability to be open to another human being. That's wisdom. What God is doing is cracking Eve open and saying to her, open yourself up to this other human being. Because as you're opening to him, you will actually, and as you interact with him, this is how you will develop wisdom, right? Everybody seeing what I'm seeing? Okay, great. Convinced? Okay, now, of course, we have to get to the most difficult part, which is, and he will rule over you, right? And for this, we need to first take a breath. So we're gonna take a break. It's 4:41. We're gonna come back at 4:45, 4 minutes to breathe, and then we're gonna get into how Adam messed up, because he did, and then what he gets back, right? How he is redeemed. And then we will see very clearly what this passage is saying. Okay, so quick break. I'll see you in 4 minutes. Take a good rest. Okay, so we are back with now Genesis 3, part 2. Let's see if everybody's back. Let me see your faces. Butterfield, Rudolph, Oliveira, Janakopoulos, Colon, Christodoulou. Great. Okay. Are we ready for the man? It's his turn. Okay. So we're going to do the same as Eve, right? We're going to go back to this moment at the tree, and we're going to see, because the man looks very innocent, right? Oh, you know, she gives a fruit, he takes, like, you know, but there's something very powerful going on here, and very, very profound going on, and very problematic going on, which we can understand only when we remember what was the task that God gave the man, right? Because this is what he's failing at right now, right? This is why he's actually, we'll see in the curse, he's made responsible for the whole, actually, it's unlike the traditional interpreters who say that Eve is the one who brought death into the world. When you read the text, God is telling Adam, cursed is the ground because of you, and from now on everything will die. So he's actually blaming the man for the death of the universe. So this is a complete opposite of what the traditional interpretations have been saying. So we have to look at the task that the man was given, and this is something that Williams brought up in his paper, right? So remember, before the man differentiates and the woman is birthed out of him, God talks to him, right? In Genesis 2, verse 19, I think, right? So let's turn there right now really quick. 2 verse, I think it's 19. I can barely read these little numbers. 14, 15. Okay, everybody with me? Chapter 2, verse 15. Put your hand in the screen if you're there. Okay. So this is task given to Adam before he is differentiated, right? Which then Adam differentiated will continue, right? Says this, the Lord God took the man, placed him in the garden to till and tend. So he's supposed to, remember these verbs, is to serve, and to protect, like the NYPD, right? To serve and to protect. It's probably where they got it from, right? And like the NYPD, he's failing lamentably. No, just kidding. So, so he's supposed to serve and protect. And so Williams was asking, well, how? Right? Well, actually, if you continue reading, you'll find out. Continue reading. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you are free to eat, but for the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you must not eat of it. So actually, this commandment not to eat is connected to the commandment to protect the universe. So I want to stop briefly on that because we need to understand this. What God is saying is the way you protect the universe is by learning not to eat what you shouldn't eat. Okay, let me say that again. The way you protect, the way you guard the cosmos, the cosmic balance, the cosmic harmony, the way you protect that is by learning not to eat what you shouldn't eat, what is not yours to eat. Now, for those of you who are environmentalists, you should get a light bulb. Huge light bulb, explaining why we are in the cosmic imbalance that we are now. What are we doing that has been causing this cosmic imbalance that we are now, that God had told the man not to do? Let's see if you can connect. What's the connection between protecting cosmic balance and not eating everything that one wants to eat? Williams, go ahead.
It was because he ate the apple, or more because, like, at that time there was just wanting disregard for nature around man. So he was like slaughtering every animal, destroying forests, things like that.
Stick to the apple.
Oh, sorry.
When you're eating what you shouldn't eat, when you have no limits, what happens to cosmic balance? When you're taking anything you want.
Oh, you just destroy everything.
Exactly. This is where we are, right? We are taking everything we want. We want a forest, boom. We want an ocean, boom. We want the Arctic, boom. And in not having limits placed upon our desire to eat everything, in not having things that we should not eat, or colonize or conquer or possess, right? This is the problem. We want everything all the time. And because we're eating and eating and eating, right? And there's no limits to what we are eating, cosmic imbalance. Are you seeing very clearly the way that we are supposed to protect the universe and to protect, or especially the man? Here is given this task, right? The way that one protects the cosmic harmony is in realizing is that there are limits to what we can have and possess. This is the whole task of man, is to create limits for society for what we are to possess. And this is where you get all the laws, right? This is the man's task, is to curb the appetite so that life can exist and endure and be sustained, right? So that's the way. So Williams, are you seeing now how the man was supposed to guard the universe? Are you seeing the connection?
Yeah, it's basically we went from so I would think of it like this: we went from a position where we had rules handed down to us by a creator or God. Then we go to a position where we take on his position, where we are stewards of the world. And instead of just being stewards, we're creating rules and regulations for not just ourselves, but everything else.
Yeah, but the thing is, to some degree, these rules are good in the sense, so this is Father's house business, right? They're good in the sense that they're systematically curbing human desire. Don't kill, don't cheat, don't steal, don't lie, right? These are all meant to teach us, don't take everything you want. So this is where the Father's house is makes sense, right? So this is the idea that so this is the task of man, right? Is to learn to curb his lust for possession. And once he learns to curb that, cosmic harmony is restored, is preserved, right? That's the way that you protect the universe, by learning to curb that instinct of everything I want to take that I want to take. Are we clear, Williams, on that part? You're muted.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay.
His basically it's to curb my innate urge for physical satisfaction through either material goods or physical experiences.
Exactly, right? If you can learn to resist one fruit, you can resist anything, right? So this was meant to teach the man, right? I need to learn that not everything can be possessed. And in doing so, in learning this, so on the one hand, Eve, right? On the one hand, the relationship is allowed through not taking the fruit, but on the other hand, cosmic balance is protected through not taking the fruit. Are you seeing how this tree is the center of both cosmic harmony and intimate harmony, right, between the man and the woman? This is so
Yes.
powerful, right? The introduction of limitation in the garden is there to teach them not only to relate, but to protect the universe, right? So Eve, she falls, right? She takes the fruit, relationship disintegrates, right? And Adam, right? Now we can measure the depth of his fault, right? Because the commandment was given, he heard it, right? Eve heard about it, but he heard it, right? Don't take the fruit or the cosmos will fall to pieces. What does Adam do? He takes the fruit, and so the cosmos falls to pieces. So he is really the one who brought the end of the world, not so much Eve, right? Because he knew he was the one who was the guardian of cosmic order through self-mastery. And in losing the self-mastery, the world goes to pieces. Are you following? This is very important if you're going to understand the next part. Are we all on the same page? Hand in the screen if you're following with me. Okay, quick interjection. Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
So was Adam also supposed to stop Eve or only stop himself?
This is himself. It would have been enough if he had stopped himself.
Ah, okay.
If he had said no, there would have been redemption, right? Because he was in charge of cosmic harmony at that moment. So if he had said no, he would have protected the world, and Eve is part of the world, right? So really, he is the one who made the whole thing tip over. There was still some hope after Eve took it, right? But once he took it, consciously going against the task that had been specifically assigned to him, right? He tips the whole thing over. And this is why God actually turns on Adam very strongly and blames him. I mean, read it. He blames him for the end of the world. He says, not Eve, like the commentators are saying. I don't know what Bible they're reading. Go here to chapter 3, verse, I hate this Bible. Chapter 3, verse, towards the end, page, verse 17. To Adam he said, because blah, blah, blah. Cursed be the ground because of you. He's saying, the world is destroyed because of you. You have destroyed this. And then he talks to him about the toil. And then watch this. To dust until you return to the ground, for from it you were taken. And then basically telling Adam, death is now brought into the world through you. All right. So this whole thing that the woman brought death, and this is a misreading, gross misreading of the text, because the text is saying, Adam, you caused the end of the world by your transgression, and you have now brought death into the world, right? So through your lack of, keyword, write this down, through your lack of self-mastery, right, you have brought about the end of cosmic harmony, right? Okay, Rudolph, go ahead.
Sorry, I had you on mute. At the same token, when we are depicting Eve with a very lovely naivete, to the point where we are celebrating her thirst for knowledge, how can we then condemn Adam? He was not told any wisdom at all. He didn't even know about the fruit. He had no idea what he was given, nor did he know that he would be responsible for the destruction of something. So is there blame to be allocated? Do we need to say that something was done wrong? Or, I made a note earlier, I don't know if many know this, in the 70s there was that movement Est by Erhard. And Erhard back then in his cult said that,
Oh,
you know where I'm going with this?
yeah, it was in the Americans.
And
Yeah.
Est wisdom, whether it's right or wrong, there's one element of it that says, don't look upon the world that you constantly need to ask and gain wisdom, but base it on life just happening, the process of life just happening. And the way things are, that is just so. So now there's a whole different story to that. I'm just using it
Yes.
as a parable to say, look, maybe Adam and Eve were forerunners of Earhart Seminars training, and just kind of looked at the whole situation like, oh, this is kind of cool. Yeah, let's do this. Naivete, define the word naivete. What is it? It's a definition that we came up with. It only means not knowing, not having wisdom, not having knowledge, acting by impulse. So it is interesting that we're now saying that Adam is the cause of everything that's been going wrong for thousands of years. Damn him, right? And all generations that followed him had no responsibility in it.
All right, I like where you're going. So let me go in. I'm going to go in your direction, but take a little turn. So, first of all, very good mother's house rebuttal, right? Well, why is Adam, the guilty one, and what kind of right? We are in the mother's house where transgression is loved, right? So let me. I will disagree with you on one point, but then I will go in your direction on another. I don't think Adam was naive, because he had specifically heard the connection between eating the fruit and cosmic destruction, right? This was in his mind. But here's where he shines, right? Just like Eve, she shines as a shamanistic, sage. Adam shines because of his love for Eve. Imagine not taking the fruit from Eve, right? Meaning she is now completely separated from him. She dies. He knows that. She dies. So he dies with her, right? There is a gesture. And we know he's like this because of the end of the story, which we'll talk about. There's something in Adam which is so profoundly loving from the beginning to the end of this narrative. He is systematically loving, right? He begins by falling in love with her and telling her, you are the bone of my bones, etc., right? Then he refuses to let her die alone, and he prefers to die with her, and then we'll see the masterful act of redemption that he does. So where Adam shines, I think, in this whole text is in his innate ability to relate and to love in the way that Eve is not yet awakened to. He knows, he is already awakened to love way before her, and he is very consistent in his love for her. So that's where I would redeem him. Does that work for you, Rudolph?
Fair enough. I'm listening.
Okay, good. And then we have to see what happens. You guys, we're not done yet, right? Okay, Williams and Edmonds. You guys are not letting me get to the punchline. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, basically, it reminds me of the fact that like it's basically now a parable about not self-sacrifice, but being able to be less willing to have conversations, be less selfish. Where Adam basically he has this almost non-selfish view where he's like a saint in the story, and it's positioning him as a saint so he could be contrasted with Eve, who's someone who's not his as saintly. She's trying to fulfill an earthly desire. So I can understand now that making him so selfless.
Wait. It's not completely selfless, because in a way, there is a weakness in him, right? He cannot resist the fruit, and he cannot resist her. There is an inability in Adam to stand up and maintain his own integrity in the face of the woman. He is, in a way, he forfeits his responsibility because he doesn't want to lose her. This is still possession, right? This is still, I have to have her. So this is not, so yes, there is love, but there's also obsession here, right? There's also codependence, right? So in a way, he forfeits his this is very important. Make sure you guys write it down. He forfeits his kingdom because he doesn't want to lose her, because he's too attached to her. This is not a big act of self-sacrifice. This is an act of, I don't want to lose you. You see, you're seeing this, right? So he's not, I wouldn't say he's a saint. He's very human, right? Like Eve, he's profoundly human. He's attached to the woman he loves. But the fault, the transgression here is him forfeiting the world, sacrificing the world to not lose her. He's unable to resist the urge, right, to lose her. He cannot in a way control his urge to possess, right? This is still possessiveness. This is not agape love. We are not in agape love. We are in eros. Possession. Okay, are we good? Clear, Williams, you're with me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Edmonds, go ahead.
Yeah, so one question I had was, it seems to me, it's nice to say that it's, the blame, some portion of the blame, a large portion of the blame should go to Adam, since that's not the typical interpretation. I like that. But starting in, verse 11, it seems like there's this sort of blame game, right? The man said, God says, have you eaten of the tree that I commanded you shouldn't eat? The man says, the woman gave it to me. And then the woman says, the serpent gave it to me. And so it does seem like Adam is, in his own way, saying, well, actually, the woman whom you gave to be with me, it's almost your fault. This woman that you created for me, it's not, how is it my fault? I just trusted that the woman that you created was good. And, since I have no knowledge of good and evil, it doesn't seem like it's this sort of any sort of selflessness. It's almost like he's just saying, yeah, well, actually, it wasn't up to me. It was up to Eve.
Yeah,
And then Eve is saying, oh, well, it's the serpent. But it does seem like the text itself is implying some level of extra responsibility for Eve that Adam doesn't get himself.
Yeah, I mean, but what we're seeing there also is he throws her under the bus. So this
Right.
confirms that there's no agape here. This is not sacrificial love. This is, I need to have you. You cannot leave this world. I will sacrifice the whole world to hang on to you, right? And then he throws her under the bus. So we are not in a, definitely he's capable of attachment. He's capable of I think, emotional attachment in a way that she isn't, which is better, right? But we're not yet here at the epitome of love, right? For sure. So, okay, so let's move on because otherwise we'll never get there. Let's go now to how God redeems him. And I want you to go to, again, Genesis 3:16. Now we saw how God redeemed the woman, gave her this, shifted her gaze to Adam. But then he says, and he shall rule. And then we have the preposition with, which I will discuss. But for now, we are seeing that the man, in a way, is made to rule. So tell me now, where is the redemptive moment? He just has lost his kingdom. He just destroyed the world, right? Because he couldn't stop his urge for possession. And God says, and he shall rule. What is God saying? So let's drop the preposition for now, but just this idea, and he shall rule. What is going on? How is this a profoundly redemptive moment in the text rather than an oppressive moment? Edmonds, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think my hand was up from before, actually, but I can try to answer that.
Okay.
I mean, I think that there is some redemption in that God is saying, no one, there's no, human man isn't perfect. Man, he's accepting the flawed nature of man, and he's giving them a chance to compensate for those weaknesses, in trying to ameliorate the Eve's weakness of hubris or something like that. And I see that as something that you can see as redemptive. I personally still see it as having punitive qualities, but I understand why there's this argument that it is a redemptive attempt.
All right. So let's see if you guys can see beyond the I don't see a punishment, and he shall rule. I'm not seeing punishment. Where is the punishment? Janakopoulos, help me.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's any punishment at all. I think he's saying, hey, I know you failed when I gave you the task the first time, but I still see the good in you, and that I will give you this task a second time. And this is for when you to prove yourself,
Okay, very good. That's what I'm seeing too. And I'll elaborate on that in a second. Rudolph, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I on the heels of what both of my brethren there said just now, to complete the arc of the conversation, when we said before that God is instigating the whole situation in the Garden of Eden, I kind of detect that Adam is coercing the same way towards Eve as God is to Adam. Half truths, half wisdom, half information, not getting the full story. And now he lands in the situation where he now needs to rule what he has destroyed. So it's a double-edged sword. On one side, you have the gift of rule and the power of rule. On the other side, you have the grueling task of trying to clean up what you did.
Yeah, very good. Yes, this is not easy, right? This is a powerful responsibility that in a way, right, God is saying, you who failed, you who did not rule, you shall nevertheless rule, right? You are still, right? You are still the heir of this kingdom, right? And then we'll look a little further. But let me see, Williams, what you have to say. Go ahead.
I was going to say for me, it was about the fact that it's God basically saying that to gain anything, you have to lose something of equal value. So he's gaining this balanced relationship with Eve instead of being in the garden. And because he's saying it, now you're being forced out, you're going to gain this, and this is going to be part of that growth. That's why I keep saying it's part of evolutionary growth. For me, it's all it is him talking.
Yeah.
So I keep saying, because
Yeah.
I think more that's what it is that like, if, like you said, if he hadn't done it, they would have been stuck in the garden, and now they're at a period where they can, because like the next chapter is about the lineage. So like I feel like that's important because it's like these are the plans that you have to like be an architect of and what you have to do. So.
Right, very good. Right, they're cast out of the garden, but they're given these two treasures. Right, she is given this teshuka, which is this ability to relate and to gain wisdom through relationship, and he is given back the lost kingdom. Right, and so this is why I'm seeing ruling in the sense of getting back the lost kingdom of cosmic rule. Right, and so this is why I do not read the text as your desire for your husband and he shall rule over you. Why does he need to rule over her? Right, since she is already coming towards him in love, not seduction like the Greeks are saying. Right, this is intention of love. And so the rule here, the preposition, I would read he will rule through her or he will rule with her. Right, so the text, if I would translate the text, or if anyone would translate the text, you could also read it, your desire for your husband and he shall rule through you or he shall rule with you. Right, but the rule is given back to the man. Now I'm going to go for the translation he shall rule through you, and I will tell you why in a second. So we'll come back to that, but first let's see the first thing that Adam does with his newfound rule. Right, so the Hebrew word for rule here of course is mashal, right, to rule. Now what is the first thing he does with his rule? Anybody sees what happens next? He's given the rule. God tells him you're going to die. And then what does Adam do after the last words of God? First action he does as the newfound governor of the universe, right? He's gotten his heritage back, his inheritance, his royalty is back. What is the first thing he does with his power? Tell me. And now you will see how rule works. Yes, go ahead.
He names Eve.
Yes, but how? What's the significance of this? What's her name? What name does he give her?
He says, and Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living.
Okay, so what is he doing? What is he doing to her? That there's two ways of seeing this, right? But what is he doing to her that is, let's look at the positive. Because remember, right, we know in the Hebrew Bible, naming is not an act of power, it's not an act of control, it's an act of revelation, right? So what is he doing here with Eve? Let's see, Janakopoulos and then Rudolph.
He kind of puts her on a pedestal, and he doesn't put any blame on her because of how much he loves her. He helps to elevate her status because since God gave him the revelation that he was the task that he would rule, he also wanted to elevate her.
Yeah.
That's why he called her the mother of all things living.
Yes. This is such a beautiful moment. Like this man just like he breaks my heart. You know, this man, right? First thing he does is not to put a big crown on his head. He turns to the woman who is still, you know, not feeling too good about the whole situation, right? And he tells her, you're not the one who brought death into the world. You are the mother of the living, right? He brings her up. He sees everything she could be. This is what it means to rule. right? To rule is to reveal the potential in everything that is around you. It's not to impose, it's not to dominate, it's to reveal, is to open, is to awaken, is to favor the growth and the development of everything around you. That's what it means to rule, right? And so this is such a masterful gesture, by the way, which is subversive with regards to what God just finished saying. Did you see this? God just finished saying, to dust you will return. Adam is like, I decree as the new ruler of the universe that this woman is the mother of the living. Do you see how he counters God? It's masterful. God just said, you will die. He turns to his wife and says, we will live. This is so powerful, right? The way that human beings in this text rise up, stand up, right, are able to get back on their feet, right, in the face of what just happened, right? He is not only elevating her, but he is responding to God and in a way rewriting the end of the story. That's what ruling means. There he is masterful, right? He says, I'm the ruler, I will rewrite this story. God, you said this, but I, the ruler of the world, I say this, right? It's very beautiful and powerful. This is like, for me, it's an explosion of light. This is the climax, right, of the story. Are you following? Are you seeing how amazing, beautiful this man is? Okay, great. So, Christodoulou, go ahead.
Can it also be seen as like a step in their relationship? Like he finally gives her a name and like knows who she is now. Like he doesn't just want to possess her. He actually.
That's beautiful. Yes, she's no more just Isha, right? Do you see how Isha is derived from the man? She's just an extension of him before. Now she's her own person. That's what it means to rule. It's the ability to rule with. Now you are this different from me, and you have the same status. You are also the mother. I am maybe the preserver of cosmic order, but you are the mother of the living. This is an unparalleled equality, right, in the ancient world. You never have this, right? So both in a way rule, but differently, right? She rules through the life, and he rules through the cosmic order, or the nomos in the Greek, the law, right? There's so much to say. I just can't. I'm just exploding everywhere in my brain. It's like I could go on like for like a whole 10 years just talking nonstop about all the details of this text, right? But I hope you're seeing now. In conclusion, can I conclude, or is there one more person? It's a long conclusion, just so you know. Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say I like what you talked about, what you said about equality, because a lot of times people think that equality is equal in all aspects, whereas equality can be, hey, you have this, and I have this, and they can be different, but when they are put together, they're equal.
Yeah, exactly. The way I'm seeing it is the man is in charge of the limitations. He's in charge of what we call the nomos in the Greek, or I think it's the Met in Sumerian. This is the law, right? Women, we're on a different wavelength. Mother's house has nothing to do with the law, but the law is really what keeps the cosmic harmony, and the man will be writing laws from generation to generation, right, in order to preserve this cosmic harmony. The woman will be on a completely different wavelength, right? She's on the wavelength of relationship and love and sacrificial love, right, which we'll talk about. That is the way that she preserves cosmic harmony, right? So very different. They rule side by side, but in different spheres, right? In this sense. Great. Christodoulou and Rudolph, you guys want to add something before I get to the conclusion?
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay. Christodoulou, go ahead. You're muted, Christodoulou. Did you have something to say?
No, I just forgot to lower my hand. Sorry.
Oh, you too. Okay. All right. Conclusion. Now, I want you to notice something. Still in Genesis 3:16, right? Notice the reciprocity, right? Her desire for your desire for your husband, and as a result, he will rule. And I'm gonna say through you, and you're going to understand why in a second. Okay. So first thing I'm noticing, first thing I want you to see is that in this text, both redeem each other. I know we talked about the woman who is the Ezer, who is the lifesaver, the redeemer, but here the man also is a redeemer. And I'm going to show you now how. First of all, what we are seeing in this text, which I haven't spoken of yet, is that because of the way that the text is written, your desire for your husband, and therefore he will rule, right? There is as though there is a cause effect. When your desire turns to your husband, he will rule. In other words, through her love, she is enabling him to rule. In other words, through his connection to her, he will rule in the right way, right? There's a beautiful text in the Tao Te Ching, Chinese text, which talks about the ultimate leader, right? And it says the perfect leader keeps to the female. This is the quote: the perfect leader keeps to the female. In other words, the perfect leader is in tune with the feminine. It's not just the masculine. The perfect leader is in tune with the feminine. So in as much as the man is open to the feminine desire, in as much as the man is open to the woman's voice, to the woman's desire, to the woman's vision, he will rule in the right way, right? If he's closed off and ruling by himself, he will be a tyrant, right? He will be a demagogue. He will be whatever, right? A totalitarian regime. But so your desire for your husband, and through this desire, he will rule. There's something to be said, I believe, right? The man can only truly rule in this world in a balanced way if his ear is open to the woman who is in his life, right? The man who rules alone. Let me give you an example in the Bible. You remember Pilate, Pontius Pilate, right before he was about to crucify the Christ? Anybody remember that story? What happened? Who came to him? Anybody knows this? Little detail.
His wife.
Yes.
His wife. And
What
she's actually a great saint in our church,
Okay.
Saint Claudia. Yeah.
What did she say? What
She
did she tell her?
pleaded to save Christ.
Why? How did she know?
She got a vision or something.
She had a dream. This is crazy.
Yeah.
This woman, the wife of this very, very tyrannical governor of Jerusalem at the time when Jesus was crucified, she has a dream that Jesus is, someone special and must not die. And she goes to her husband and says, please do not crucify him because he is innocent and terrible things will happen if you do. And he does not listen. And we know the end of the story of Pilate. He very, very shortly after the crucifixion of Jesus, he is murdered and deposed, and he ends up he doesn't end well, right? So this is a typical example, right, of a governor closed off to the woman's voice, and therefore a governor who not only destroys himself but is very tyrannical. We know through history, through the witness of the historians, that he was a very cruel ruler, right? Very, very tyrannical, right? So this is kind of just an example, right, of this notion of, as a man, you can truly rule, you can truly excel in leadership only to the degree that you're open to the voice of the woman, right? And this is all over. This is in theology, in government, in science, right? In academia. How open are we to the female voice? And this will determine how well we are doing the task that we are meant to be doing. So I'm seeing here so you see how in that sense he rules through her, right? Your desire for your husband, and he will rule through you. He will rule well through you. Are you seeing this? This is me interpreting this by myself. This is not written anywhere, but I'm thinking there's some, evidence. I mean, I feel like it fits good. And I'm going to add actually now a story by Inanna, which will clarify this beautifully. But before I do so, I think Rudolph has something to say. Go ahead. You're muted.
Sorry about that. So I made some notes during the conversation, and what it leads me to is that it upends the entire definition of the word rule. It shows that the desire of one individual to have total control, supreme decision-making ability, whether he or she seeks wisdom from another woman or another man is idiotic. It doesn't work. It never did. Whenever it was tried in the past, it failed, and it pushed cultures and societies into the abyss. It lasts only for so long. So it is very interesting to see that at these early times, someone already said, wait a second, if we want to create a kind of a state democracy that serves all, we need to make sure that at the root of it, man and woman, husband and wife, he and she, needs to have some sort of congruence, some sort of collaboration for this all to work.
Yeah, exactly, right? This is this is a permeable type of ruling. This is not ruling alone is an oxymoron in the Hebrew Bible. You rule well when your ears are open. Right? That's when you rule well. So this is really what I'm seeing here, is that in a way her love is enabling his rule, and we saw how his rule is enabling her also, right? We saw this, the way that he redeems her through the renaming, right? But let me now just add here the story of Inanna, which I think echoes this situation, and you will see the parallels. And I just find it interesting, and maybe you can think about it further. But here's a story of Inanna, I'm writing here, and her lover Dumutsi. Now, in Sumerian culture, the kings, the way that they were enthroned, it's so interesting. There's so many parallels between this Sumerian culture and this text here. The way the ruler was enthroned is they had to sleep with the goddess, and then she would give them her power, life-giving power, and then the man would have the power to rule. So for example, Inanna, the goddess Inanna, when she meets her first husband, she has many husbands, she meets her first husband, who is a shepherd called Dumutsi. And they fall in love, and they get married, and they sleep together, and the lovemaking is described in very, very graphic detail in the Sumerian texts, right? But so it's very interesting to read. And so they have this marriage night, right? Wedding night. And then she tells him this. She says, now I will give you your scepter and your crown, right? So in other words, the contact with her has given him the power to rule, to be king, right? And so now through her, he becomes king. And then every new king after Dumutsi had to go through this ritual marriage with the goddess. So they would have a ceremony where the new king would go in the temple of Inanna and sleep with a priestess there who represented Inanna, and then he would come out the next morning and he would be empowered to be the king. The reason for this, probably scholars believe, is that the woman, because of her ability to create life, was seen as having a power similar to God, right? Because God creates life. And here's the woman through her womb creating life. And so the ancients believed that the womb of the woman had some special divine power, right? And so if the man is able to go there and enter there, he receives this divine power, right? So this was the belief, that the woman had this kind of special divine power because of her ability to give birth, right? And we see the element of birth in our text also. And so the man would sleep with the woman and enter her womb and really get tap into this power and emerge the king of the land, right? So this is so fascinating to me. I'm just leaving you with this because I just thought about it the last few months, that we have the similar thing. We have the woman coming to the man with love, with sexual desire, and through this, the man becomes the king, right? Are you kind of seeing the parallels? I mean, I thought it was interesting. Put your hand on the screen if you're following vaguely what I'm saying, right? So that's why I translate to rule through, because in the Sumerian culture, there was already this very established idea that the man ruled through contact with a woman. You had to come into contact with a woman to be empowered to rule in the Sumerian culture. The king would be enthroned after sleeping with the goddess, right? Not before. Only by going through the woman was the king deemed ready to rule. And here I think we have something similar, where Eve, right, through the desire that she has towards Adam, through the way that she moves towards him, and the way she empowers him to rule likewise. So I'm just, if we read this text in the light of the Sumerian texts of the sacred marriage, we see a completely different thing going on here than the oppression of the woman by the man, right? We see the empowerment of the woman, of the man by the woman. Ooh, this is good. Let me say it again, right? Instead of instead of the oppression of the woman by the man. When you read this through the Sumerian lens, you see the empowerment of the man through the woman. Are you seeing how everything is reversed when we read the text in the right context? Are you seeing this? Put your hand if you're following me. Okay, so this is so cool, right? So I can't stop. Okay, so anyways, so yeah, so this is very interesting. So now we can conclude now. Maybe we are better equipped to see how our text is a text from the mother's house. This is what I wanted to say before, but now I'm gonna say it. So let me see if I have these notes. Of course I don't. So tell me, what did we say were the 4 characteristics of the mother's house? And then we'll see how this text fits into it, since we have a little time left. Go back to your notes, because I don't have them. I didn't bring them. So tell me the 4 characteristics of the mother's house.
Intimacy, the temple to the garden, sacrificial love, and this idea of like immersing yourself into the world.
Okay, wait, say that again. I'm taking note. What's the first one?
Oh, intimacy.
Yeah, immanent God. Yeah. Yes.
Temple to garden.
Mm-hmm.
Sacrificial love, and the 4th one, like immersing yourself into the world.
Okay, great. All right, let's do this. Let's do this together. Transcendent, judgmental God versus immanent God, who kind of is working out or creative, right, with our trespasses. Clearly, here we are in the mother's house for the first point, right? In the sense that we have a God who is kind of instigating these things and is not overwhelmed by our transgressions, but on the contrary, uses them as opportunity for creativity, for like Williams have been saying all along, right? This is the human evolution. All of these are stages in the human evolution. You don't have a God talking, you don't have the word sin, you don't have original sin here, you don't have God judging them, you have a kind of God moving with them and kind of orienting them in a destiny. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Rudolph, go ahead. Maybe I should have let you answer this question. You're muted.
Apologies, I did not hear you. I answered a call on my other screen. So.
Okay. Your hand is up. That's why I'm calling on you.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't. I was distracted.
Got it. Okay. So anybody want to add to this first point? How our text that we studied fits under mother's house category?
So it's the setup of Adam choosing to forego the comforts of the garden to go out into the world and rule his own thing. Then it's also the sequence of Eve taking the apple and her disobeying, but not necessarily disobeying, but just finding another path to enlightenment instead of following Adam's rules, or following God's rules, because she hasn't interacted with him in the story. It's following those rules.
Yeah. So you can see, right, this is not a narrative about sin and punishment, right? We are not in the context of sin and punishment, right? We are in the context of a God kind of facilitating, instigating human development, right? Or human evolution. So that's how I would, so very good. That's how I would put it. Okay, number 2, the garden versus the temple. Obviously, right? We're in a garden. And I remember this is important. I told you how this is a contrast with Sumerian religion, where in Sumerian religion, people were supposed to feed the gods, and here it is God who is feeding us, right? This is the context of grace versus works, right? We are really in the context of, we are here to receive. God is working for us rather than we are working for God. This is an important theological point and theological narrative that we will be leaving behind. When you look at the remaining text that we're going to study in Genesis 4, Genesis 11, specifically each time they mention, and they moved east of Eden and further east of Eden. So we're moving away from not just the garden, but the type of spirituality which is based on grace and receptivity. We're moving towards works. and it culminates in the Tower of Babel, which is now we're back in Sumerian, right? Working for God, feeding God, right? So the garden theology is what the book of Ecclesiastes will reclaim, right? This notion of receiving versus doing. So very, very typical mother's house there. What about number 3? How is our text like number 3? No, so this is not a legalistic, rules-based approach, but love-based approach. Anything that you're seeing that connects to point 3? So love versus law. Can you see anything that would resonate here in our text?
Well,
Crystal.
Adam following. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
So I guess you want to finish your point, Edmonds?
Yeah, sorry, I should have raised my hand. I didn't see other hands up. I was just going to say that I thought that Adam accepting the fruit from his wife after she tastes it seems like a good example of that sort of sacrificial love. You know, even though he recognizes that it's against the code he's agreed to follow, he still does it because he doesn't want to abandon Eve.
Right, or he's codependent. I still don't think it's a glorious moment. Right, but you're right. It could be, right? I don't know what he's thinking, right? But yeah, there is at least on that part of Adam, and maybe this is why he's given the kingdom, right? Because of this ability to love, right? He's the one ultimately who holds the keys of the kingdom because his heart is in the right place, at least, right? She holds the key to knowledge, right? But he holds the keys to the kingdom. So, so very interesting. Yes. So you have, you kind of have the rules seem to be meant to be broken. I mean, this is what I'm saying, right? This is very mother's house. You have a rule which is meant to be broken, it seems, in this text, and the transgressor is seen in the most positive light, right? Eve, in a way, is the main character in the story, right? The narrator seems to be focusing on Eve, and the same, by the way, later on with Cain. Cain is also going to be the star. So there is kind of something in the transgressor which is appealing to the right, to the one writing this text. So it is down that we have the rules seem to be meant to be broken, right? In this text, versus kept, right? This is very, very different from what we'll see later on. Let's see, a couple more people. Christodoulou and then Rudolph.
I was going to say that, like, not only are the rules meant to be broken, but the punishment for the breaking is a redemption. Not like he's not beaten. You know, he is given something to build himself back up again.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, right? I mean, in a way, the rule is meant to be broken, and the punishment is turned into a gift, an inheritance, right? She receives the love, he receives the kingdom. So this is nothing to do with this, world we are in now, where we make a mistake and we're like, oh my God, I'm cursed. I'm gonna have all this karma now. This is very different worldview, very different narrative, where the stumbling are opportunities for redemption. This is very mother's house. Our stumblings, let me say that again, right? Our stumblings become opportunities for redemption. And this is very, very mother's house and not so much father's house. Rudolph, go ahead.
Well, you mentioned earlier law versus love, and I want to expound on that and say it's more law versus liberal guidance, kind of parental tough love, which is to this day in every culture still a mainstream, a main element of how the culture works.
Yeah. Very good. Yes, it's tough love, right? I mean, we talked about the kingdom and the love, but we forgot to talk about the pain. It's there too, right? There is a lot of pain still. There is a lot of challenge coming now into the new world that they're being ushered in, right? But so yes, tough love for sure, definitely. Okay, last one. Separating from the world, entering the world. How are we seeing this here in this text? That one's easy. I think Williams can answer that one. He's been talking about it the whole time. Williams, you want to venture?
Say it again. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yes. So we have the point 4, right? We have the notion of separating from the world versus entering the world. How are you seeing elements of this in our text? And you've been talking about it the whole time.
Excuse me. Basically, once they decided to leave the garden, they entered the regular world, and they were able to become their own people, not God's objects or God's vessels. I would say the best word I could say is vassals, because technically they were like in a serf position to God, because the garden basically is like almost like a serf's position. The angels are lords of the manor, and they stopped becoming vassals, and they became basically scientists, artists, doctors, whatever. And through this period of self-discovery, they're able to push themselves forward.
Yeah, notice, right? Instead of wanting to keep them safe in the garden, right? God is leading to their expulsion into the world, right? And this is not the God that wants us to be sheltered. This is not a God that wants us to be separate from the world and over here pure, right? This is a God going to push us into the world, right? Like I don't know if your parents did this when they try to teach you to swim, just throw you in the water, right? There's some parents like that. This is the kind of God, right? It's like, out, go, right? Kind of saying, don't stay separate. Move into the world, right? And here are the tools I'm giving to Eve. I'm giving the wisdom of relationship to Adam. I'm giving the keys of the kingdom. Now go and reign into the world, right? Both of you. So yes. So are you seeing how this text, right, belongs clearly to the mother's house literature, right? We're here smack into the mother's house still. Okay. Any last questions or comments on this text? Everything clear? Okay, so we will continue with Genesis, same mentality, but now we will talk about the sons of Adam and Eve with Cain and Abel tomorrow. And we will talk about the Tower of Babel, which is the moving away from the garden towards the temple, right? We're leaving behind this narrative for something else. Okay, so for tomorrow, you will prepare Genesis 4 until 11. Just read the whole thing, but you can focus your reading assignment on chapter 4 and chapter 11. I think I need you to read chapter 12 also, because I'm going to contrast Babel with Abraham. So actually read from chapter 4 to 12, because 11 and 12 are in parallel and we're going to read them like that. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. And then whoever wants to leave can leave, and whoever needs to stay can stay.